So today we are doing After Blenheim, which is written by Robert Southey. This is an anti-war poem. It has been set up in the Bavarian town of Blenheim in southern Germany. Alright, the Battle of Blenheim was fought in 1704, and it was fought between English and Austrians on one side and the French on the other hand. Alright, this poem brings out the horrors of war in a very simple and ironic way. Alright, so it condemns blind patriotism, and it admonishes all the wars which only bring out horror, death, and destruction. Alright, so as the poet begins the poem, he's talking about a very fine summer evening where old man Casper, there's an old man named Casper. He's relaxing after day's work, and his grandchildren are just playing around him. Alright, his granddaughter is with him, and his grandson is a little away near the stream. Alright, there's a stream flowing, and he's somewhere near there. Alright, and then this little girl, she sees her brother. The name of the brother is Peterkin. He was rolling something large and round. Now this is very noticeable over here, how what is being referred to as large and round. So she says that she's anxious that what has he found, and the grandchild also takes it, and he brings it to the grandfather, and he says that I found it beside the stream, and this is something that he had also never seen. Alright, so he was playing with it, and curiosity made him bring it to his grandfather and ask about it, that what is this large, round, smooth thing that it's looking like a ball. But obviously this wasn't a ball. This was not a ball. Alright, old Casper, he took it away from the boy. The grandfather quickly took it away from the hands of his grandchild, and he looked at it, and then he gave a sigh. He gave out a sigh. Now he says that he shook his head. It is said that now after taking this sigh is a sigh of sorrow. Alright, he is very upset and disappointed at the war that had taken place, and years ago this war had devoured innocent lives. So he sighed at this shows his disappointment, and he's shaking his head, and he says that it is the skull of some unfortunate person who lost his life in this great victory. So it's very ironical that he's showing disappointment at one point, and then he's saying that an innocent person has lost his life, but again he mentions it to be a great victory. Alright, then as we move to the next stanza, we find that this old Casper, he is a farmer, and for him, when he plows the fields, for him getting skulls buried in the ground is a very common sight for him. He has found many such skulls when he plowed his field. He is a farmer. When he plows his fields, he often finds such skulls buried in the soil. The plowshare, it brings the skull. When he plows the plowshare, it brings the skull from under the earth, because thousands of men were killed in those very fields during the great victory. Alright, so continuously saying that there is he is talking about death of thousands of men, death of innocent people, but then he refers to the victory as a great victory. So it's very ironical over here. You can notice that in the previous stanza, the adjectives like young and little were used. It just highlights the innocence of little Peterkin and Wilmine. Alright, the poet has used the innocence of children to condemn the war. Alright, to emphasize on the horrors of the war. Fine. Then as we move to the next stanza, we find that the young Peter is wanting to know more about it. He says, "Now tell us what it was all about." He is interested in knowing that why was the war fought, and what all happened during that war. So he wants to know more about that great victory, because his grandfather termed it to be a great victory. He wanted to know more about it, and he asked his grandfather to tell him all in detail, all about the war and the cause of the war, while Wilhelmine's eyes were full of curiosity too. Now the young girl, she also wants to get information about why had such a war taken place, where thousands of men were killed, and still their grandfather is calling it to be a great victory. You can find there is a mention in this stanza with wonder waiting eyes. So this is used for Wilhelmine, and she is expecting to know the cause of the war from her grandfather. And this you can mark it because alliteration has been used over here with wonder waiting. Alright, so there is a repetition of the word W, so this can be taken as this is an alliteration that is used over here. So she is looking up with anxious eyes because she cannot comprehend the cause of the war, so it has filled her with wonder, and she is anticipating to get a favorable answer from his grandfather. Alright, so now Peterkin, he was not the grandfather starts telling them that the war was fought between the English and the French. So but Peterkin is not very satisfied with the reply. Caspar himself did not know the cause of the war. Caspar just told them that the war was fought between English and French, while the English defeated the French, but he was not able to tell the exact cause of the war. And why he did not know it? Because no one talked about what they fought each other for, what was the reason, what was the cause. They did not know because nobody talked about it. What everybody talked about was that it was a great victory. English had defeated the French and it was a great victory. So Caspar is not the Peterkin is not satisfied with the reply. Alright, but Caspar himself did not know the cause and he never tried to find it out, so he could not help Peterkin with the answer. Alright, so moving to next stanza, Caspar says that his father, he's telling that what had happened during the war. He says that his father lived at Blenheim, close to a nearby stream, during the war. And in this war, what happened? Their house was completely burnt and he had to fly. Fly means run away from that place with his wife and children, but they had nowhere to go. Alright, they had no other place to shelter themselves during the fierce war. So obviously this had not happened not just to Caspar but to thousands of other peoples, because same thing had happened to them, that because of the war they had to leave their houses, leave their cattle behind, everything behind, and they had to run away. Alright, they had to run away from the war, the horrors of the war, to save themselves from it. Alright, so this is common man's ignorance, and there is obviously the common people, they are ignorant of the cause of the war. They do not know why the war was being fought and why they had to lose everything they had. They just ran from here to there to save their lives from the during the war, and now they just know that it was a great victory that they had received and defeated the French. Alright, they do not have got much information about it. Alright, so he tells that to Peterkin and Wilhelmine. Fine. So now he moves ahead and he says that with fire and sword the country round was wasted far and wide. So you can focus on the words that are being used, that because of the fire, because of the sword, the country is being wasted. All right, so they know that it is very you know wasteful that war has taken place. It has led to loss of life and loss of property. But he says that and many a childing mother then and newborn baby died, but things like that, must be at every famous victory. All right, so there is irony present over here again. Why? Because childing mother, this phrase, you may underline this phrase, means it is used for mothers who are expecting a baby. All right, so expecting mothers also lost their lives, and even newborn babies were not spared. They also died during the war. So death of childing mothers and newborn babies has been used to underline not only the horror of the war, but also that this was needed for a famous victory. To achieve a famous victory, you had to kill newborn babies and pregnant women too. All right, so at what cost we are getting the famous victory, that is being highlighted over here. So it's very ironical that he is using the poet is using the killing of the newborn babies and the famous victory together. All right, so continuously he is repeating that it was a famous victory. He is mentioning the horrors of the war from place to place, and he is continuously telling you that it was a famous victory. That is, though the victory was famous, but at what cost? So this was the cost they had to pay to achieve that famous victory. All right, then moving ahead, they say it was a shocking sight. So what do the people say? The people who saw the battlefield soon after the famous victory, they witnessed a shocking sight of what? Of thousands of bodies rotting in the open field. Death and destruction was on such a large scale. Death and destruction, it had happened on a very large scale, that the dead were not given minimum courtesy of a decent burial. They could not even get a decent burial. Fine. And he also added some other unfortunate things that had happened during the war. But again he says, but things like that, must be after a famous victory. So again he is mentioning that all this is required to achieve a famous victory. All right, so the poet is pitying for the speaker, that he sighed at the sight of a poor fellow's skull, but his conditioning was such that he was justifying the war. He is every day witnessing skulls of all various men and women, but still he is justifying the war, saying that all this is necessary to achieve a famous victory. So you can imagine his condition. All right, fine. They over here, that said, they say it was a shocking sight. They over here, it refers to those who had reported the battle scene, who had seen the after effects of the war, and they had reported it to other people. And similarly Casper also heard the stories from them. All right, now this sight is very shocking. Why? Because the war was won at the price of thousands of lives. Fine. And the sight of the bodies lying about in the sun rotting, it was a gruesome sight. It was a terrible sight. All right, then great praise the Duke of Marlborough won, and our good Prince Eugene. Why, it was a very wicked thing, said little Wilmine. So now obviously the children, they are very innocent. All right, so she does not like whether his grandfather continuously tells her, her grandfather continuously tells her that it was all required for a great victory, and it was a great victory, but she's not very happy. She says that now this is very shocking. All right, it is a very wicked thing. She expressed her shock, she expressed her surprise, and said that they should not be praised for a wicked thing that they had done. So the grandfather corrected her by saying that it was a great victory. So when she expresses her disgust for the war, she says, no, no, my little girl, you must not say that, because it was a famous victory. So he's himself justifying the war and making his grandchildren also understand that now all this is required to achieve a great victory. This is all not so bad as you may feel it to be, or as it may seem. And he continues to call it a great victory. Everyone in England praised the Duke, whose bravery in the battle won this unique victory for them. Peterkin asked his grandfather what good came out of it. Right? He's asking now, but what good came out of it at last, quoth little Peterkin. So he's asking that what good did you receive from it? To which Caspar had nothing to say except to repeat the line he had been uttering all through the time, that is, it was a famous victory. So talking about the cause of the war, he does not know what is the cause of the war. He doesn't know what good came out of fighting this war, but all he knows is that it was a great victory. So actually he did not ever try to find out the cause of the war, or what were the what finally what good they had received of this war, but he only knew what others had told him, or what he had heard from others, that it was a great victory. So the common man, this is bringing to notice the ignorance of the common man, how ignorant they are. All right, they do not know that why the war is being fought, why they are losing their life and property, what good is coming out of it. They do not know anything. They have just been told that this was all necessary to achieve a great victory, and because a great victory has been achieved, it's all justified. So the same language Caspar is speaking, and the same he's teaching his grandchildren. If you talk about the tone of the poem, it's very ironical and sarcastic throughout, from the beginning to the end. The poet, he wants to question the utility of waging a war. He asks that this war is causing destruction of both human lives and property. So what is the purpose of fighting such a war? Why is it necessary? All right, he does this by means of old Caspar and his grandchildren, where Caspar is the old children, they are asking, he is making use of the innocence, the poet is making use of the innocence of the children to ask questions that must be put up, and Caspar, like any other ignorant common man, he's answering his children's question in the same way,